Welcome to Martinez Life. I'm Tom Greerty. You know, in Martinez we have a lot of trials, and a lot of trial lawyers come to our county, and they're great lawyers, but I can't think of anyone who comes and tries cases in Contra Costa County better than Gary Gwilliam, and I thank him for coming on the show. How are you, Gary?
Thank you, Tom. I'm fine. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you've been practicing law for how long now?
Well, I've been practicing plaintiff's law for 41 years in Oakland, with my work in Oakland and Contra Costa County, most of it.
Yeah, you've done some amazing things. Mostly plaintiff's side that you represent, or the injured person, or the person that's been fired or discriminated against.
Always. I'm always a plaintiff's lawyer, consumer advocate, civil rights, plaintiff's lawyer.
Yeah, and in fact, you worked with a guy that was from Martinez originally, Greerty. Didn't you work with one of the firms you started
When
with?
I started my practice, I joined a very established firm in the 60s, and Ed Greerty was a named partner, and I practiced law with him for many years.
Yeah. The amazing thing, and one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show, was you've written a terrific book. I really have enjoyed it. And Steve, can we get that on the air a little bit and show it? It's a book about your life. Why don't you say the title there, Gary?
The title is Getting a Winning Verdict in My Personal Life, A Trial Lawyer Finds His Soul.
A trial lawyer finds his soul. I read
Some people think that's an oxymoron.
Really?
Trial lawyers do have souls.
Absolutely, I know they do, yeah. Well, I know a lot of the good work you've done over the years, as I do plaintiff's work as well. That CSAA case just jumps up a little bit. The work you did on it, the depositions. Didn't your office do like 300 depositions?
Our small office with like 5 lawyers in it did 380 depositions. We had lawyers that come in and help us, and contract lawyers. It was a major case, and it was most satisfying because the work we did helped so many people who were being cheated and pushed around by the big insurance companies. And as a result of that case, changes were made and people were treated more fairly.
Yeah, because they weren't paying med pay. When you got injured, I was a witness to it. They flat were not paying.
It was terrible.
Not reasonable, not necessary.
You got it.
It was a great victory, though. And there's so many other ones, but you've also had other victories in your life, including over this thing that does attack trial lawyers, the problem of drugs and alcohol, or alcohol in your case. I mean, amazing victory there. You slipped and you fell and you got up now, and it seems like you've beaten it. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if I could just talk a little bit about the book for a minute. I wrote the book because I wanted to talk not just about wins.
Sure.
I want to talk about losses. I want to talk about what it's really like. Any good lawyer is going to lose cases. If you win all your cases, you're not standing up for what you believe in. You're not fighting the tough fight. And anybody that tells me they won all their cases is probably 1 for 1. I've tried 175 jury trials. I've lost 30 trials. That's more than most people will ever try in their case. But I felt that I wanted to write something, unlike most trial lawyers in this country, that says what it's really like. And I dealt very honestly with both losses, and I begin the book with that, and with my alcohol, and with relationship issues, and with the things that we struggle with to fight the fight that you and so many of my good colleagues have fought over the years to represent plaintiffs against big interests. So I wanted this book to be able to reflect the difficulties as well as the victories. And it's a story of redemption ultimately. But I was very proud of the fact that I really bared my soul in this book.
You did. And the thing that you were born in Utah, Ogden, Utah.
Right.
Some of your family are Mormon.
Oh, yeah, all of them.
You have a grandfather that was a bodyguard to Brigham Young.
Yes. My great-great-grandfather was named Wild Bill Hickman. He was known as the Avenging Angel. He was a bodyguard to Brigham Young. And he had 10 wives and 24 kids. And I've got a complicated family tree that you wouldn't believe the branches that goes out with all those relatives. But that was common in the Mormon religion at the time. And I wasn't raised in a strict Mormon. I was raised in the Northwest, and I kind of escaped a lot of the hardline stuff there.
And your family moved to Eugene, which I know a little bit, near Franklin Boulevard in the old Hayward Field area.
Yeah, I was right across the street from Hayward Field at the time, University of Oregon, kind of grew up in the shadow of it there. Watched great players. There was a great football player named Norm Van Brocklin. I was a little kid about this big, watched him play
the great
football.
Norm, yeah. And ultimately, your mother, whom you're very close to, you end up in Seattle and raised in Seattle. And there's a thing in your book that I want to go to and see if I can find it, because I want to read a little bit. May I do that with your permission?
Of course.
Thank you. And this is Gary's contribution to the preparation for his 50th high school reunion. So the class of 55, which you were, in 2005 had their 50th reunion.
And I was a child prodigy. I'm nowhere near that old, but that happens to be the case.
So here's what you say. I am an unknown alumnus to you. I know that no one from my class has been, I know no one from our class, and I have not been in touch with any of our graduates since 1955. My friends were delinquents and gang members, and only 3 of us graduated from high school. 1 went to prison, the 2nd committed suicide, and I'm the 3rd. I wore a ducktail, peg pants, blue suede shoes, and did not participate in many typical high school activities. Mainly, we just partied. Lots of drinking, drugs, wild parties. I'm coming back to this reunion, therefore, not to see old friends, but to make new ones. I'm coming to a reunion that I never thought would happen. I'm certain that I will not know anyone there, but no one will know me either. I never did know anybody but a few of my gang friends who are now gone. I haven't had any contact with any of you since that graduation day when I left in 1955. Great. And then what I know happens.
Right.
You go to junior college, you get sent down to this long-lost father, right, who had almost no contact in your life, and he helps you, and your stepmother helps you. Right. You enter junior college, and I love junior college. I went to Diablo Valley.
Right.
And that junior college you went, and 2 years later, you are voted by the students to be the most likely to succeed.
Right. It's really kind of an amazing story. I mean, here I was a gang member. I had a tattoo on my hand. I stole cars, took heroin. We used to sell marijuana and roll up catnip joints and sell them for $1 to what we call the rich kids in there. And I got kicked out of high school on my 18th birthday for smoking on the steps. It was kind of act of defiance, and they let me back in. But I was not considered strong material for going on to school, let alone being a lawyer. But I think I had some good background. My mother loved me, and I always had ambition, and I really did want to get out of that circumstance. So I was transported from Seattle to Southern California, and I flourished down there. And I was very fortunate to be in a situation where I could make a really significant turnaround in my life.
Yeah, it's an astounding turnaround in my judgment to be voted the most likely to succeed. What prescient judgment by that student body, in my opinion. And then how do you go on? Then you go on to Pomona College.
Right. I went on to what I consider to be the best school on the West Coast. It was certainly right up there with Stanford, and I was fortunate enough to get in, and transferred in and made some lifelong, very interesting friends.
Where's
Pomona's in the Claremont Colleges down in Southern California, just out near the San Bernardino border, and it's a well-known private school. Claremont and Claremont Men's College and Scripps, Pomona are all down there.
Yeah.
And then again, I got wild. I joined an absolutely crazy fraternity that were all of the jocks and the hard drinkers, and I started becoming a party boy again, except that I was doing it in a much more socially acceptable way.
Yeah, so you became a frat guy.
Oh, tough guy, frat guy, you bet it.
Yeah, at Pomona. And what was it, Kappa Delta?
It was a private fraternity down there. There was a small fraternity. There were only 14 kids in our graduating class, and only 8 in the one before me. So there were only about 30 kids, and we all knew each other very well, and we were very tight. And I have made friendships in those few years that have lasted all 50 years. Some of my best friends are still very close to me from that fraternity.
Yeah. And this relationship that you have with your mother that's so strong continues on and on and on. And then one day, many years later, decades later, you're in trial, and your co-counsel comes over to you, and you're examining a witness in a medical malpractice case, and he hands it to you, Steve Brewer, this notice, and you brush it off a little bit. He says, no, you have to take a break. And you say, what do you mean? You turn to the judge, can we take a recess? Judge says, well, okay. And then you get a note that your mother had died.
It was one of those moments you never forget in your entire life. It was 1988, and I was distracted from a lot of things. I was a president involved in a big political battle. My partner, Steve Brewer, who was with me at the time, young partner, we were just trying this case. And, you go in and you get handed this, you're in front of the judge, you're in front of the defense attorney, and I wanted to cry. I mean, it's kind of emotional to think about it, but you're not supposed to do that.
Of course not.
You're a lawyer, you're tough, and I had to kind of hold it in and gut it out, but I will never forget that day, and it was a very important moment.
What did the judge do in that? I mean, here you are, you've got to go take care of your family, you've got to go to your funeral.
Oh, he was very kind. He was a real nice guy, and he said, look, we just got to do what we got to do. He went back in and told him, seriously, there's been a death in his family, it's quite serious, and he has to go back, and so we just recessed the case for about a week. And I went back and and had to give this eulogy. I was the only son. I was the firstborn son and the one that really needed to do it. I needed to kind of organize it, put it together, and then I gave this eulogy, which was something I'll never forget either, at my mom's funeral, and then turned right around and had to go back to trial. And that's the story of a trial lawyer, Tom. You know, you're there. We have to. I had a client that was very important, and I had an issue that I had to fight. And you just have to find the time to do that sometimes. And you have to take these deeply personal matters, and yet the devotion and the necessary caring that we have for our clients, we have to go on with that fight and do what we have to do.
And when you're at this great college, this college named Pomona, it's a terrific school, and you've described that to us. Somebody, Fred Sontag or somebody advises you, Gwilliam, you're a lawyer.
Well, it wasn't quite that simple, but you know, I like a lot of kids in those days. It's my senior year. I'm having a great time. I'm in a fun fraternity where, you know, I want to party and play, and I didn't want to think about what I wanted to do. I didn't have anybody that had ever gone to college in my family, let alone completed it or going on to graduate school. And so I was a salesman. I'd had some done very well in some sales, and so Fred Sontag, who was our fraternity advisor and a very well-known professor of philosophy, he's emeritus down there now, just came up to me one day and he said, Gary, he says, have you thought about what you want to do? Like a lot of us as seniors in the high school, I mean the college, well, not really, maybe an MBA, maybe graduate school. And he turned to me and he looked at me and he says, you ought to be a lawyer. And it was like a gestalt. I mean, for a minute there was a question mark above my head because I didn't know a lawyer. There were no lawyer TV shows. I didn't know, I'd never thought about a lawyer, and all of a sudden it just hit me, you know. He says, look, you got a gift of gab, you got smart, you know, you can, he says, it's exactly what you should do. And I'm telling you, it was another life-changing moment. It just sent me off into something that I think I was born to do. I think I was born to be a lawyer in this life, and I think that I've devoted myself to the law. And there's nothing else I can imagine that I would ever done in this life except be a lawyer.
And before you end up going to Bolt Hall in Berkeley, right? But jumping a little ahead of that, okay? You end up going back down to Southern California, you become a deputy district attorney, and you get a lot of trial experience. I think you're in there for a number of years.
About 4, yeah.
Yeah, and the one fellow that interviews you for the job sees you're born in Utah.
Well, he happened to be, if you know anything about the LDS Church, and I do have good respect for the church, my family was all in it, he was a stake president. He wasn't just a bishop, so he was up there pretty high. And I didn't know for sure that had anything to do with my being hired, but about 3 days later, after years and years, I hear a knock on the door, and I open it up, and they say, Brother Gwilliam, we're the missionaries here to talk to you. Well, No, I hadn't talked to anybody from the church for years and years, so I had to walk this kind of fine line by, I really wasn't ready to be back into the fold, so to speak, and yet I didn't want to offend my boss, so I had to be Brother Gwilliam for a while.
There you go. Yeah. And then ultimately, though, you're married at that time, and your wife wants to go back to the Bay Area, Northern California, and you've been there enough, you like it, and ultimately you end up with Jess Nichols.
Right, famous lawyer who tried lots of cases out here in Contra Costa County, and everybody knew him out here. And I was very fortunate to go with the best of the best in the East Bay, and got some good training. And I stayed with that firm until it kind of disbanded and took it over. So my roots go back to the very deep part of that firm, and I love. You know, one thing, and I don't know if I wrote this too much about my book, but I think one thing that kind of carried me on is my mother became a saleswoman, a very successful one in the 50s. So she was an example of a working mother that did well, and she kept me a message, and that message was, Gary, you can do anything you want. You can be anyone you want. Mm-hmm. Well, I took that to heart, but I also took a corollary which got me in trouble, and that is, you can get away with anything you want. And that was kind of a corollary, interestingly enough, that kind of got me to the point where I thought I could do all this stuff and get in trouble and stay out all night, take drugs and come back, and everything was going to be fine. And I think that kind of, I think you can get away with what you want. I needed to get rid of that corollary and get back to you can be what you want. And that message is very important because we can. You're an example of it too, Tom. I know you are.
Yeah, you know, and this whole situation, and you in high school and everything, so few of your friends and fellow gang members graduated from high school, and then the other two that did, one ends up suicide and the other in prison and stuff. What was it in you that kept you floating in the mainstream enough to graduate, even though you didn't participate in really any of the social things? Was it the intelligence, or?
Well, gee, I'd like to tell you there was intelligence and ambition, but the truth of the matter is we were required to have 1 hour of study hall every day, and I was taking enough uppers, the bennies and dexedrines, that I was buzzed like heck, so I would get some pretty good studying done in that 1 hour, because I wasn't studying anywhere else. So I think study hall saved me, although, I mean, obviously I had to.
Tom, can we get a photo? This, you did graduate, and this is the photo.
That's, boy, we changed, don't we?
Yeah. Well, you're good looking, though.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
I don't know if you want to get into the final part of my book, but
yeah,
there's something interesting that I say at the end of my book, and when I went back to this high school reunion, and that was, if I passed this kid on the street, if I sat down and talked to him, I wouldn't recognize him. I would have nothing in common with him, except the same mother, the same genes. And am I the same person? When I wrote this book, the question came to me, am I really the same person as this kid in high school? Or have we morphed into something entirely different? We don't have any of the same cells in our body. Our cells regenerate every 7 years, all of them, most of them within a year. We don't have anything. I mean, all I have is just old memories. We're only
you
our
got the
memories.
same soul.
We do, but that soul was not with that kid then. He didn't know where it was. I had to find it later and bring it out. Yes, we do. But he would not, if I were to talk to him, he wouldn't have any of the same interests. So what would he care about, a lawyer, or civil rights, or justice, or the things I cared about? He cared about what kids care about, having fun, good time, women, drink, fun, song, dance. I was a good dancer. And it is an interesting question. Do we change? Are we really different people than we used to be fundamentally?
No. Thomas Patrick Greerty. It's my show, but you have your opinion.
It's my book.
It is your book. No,
It's
I don't
just
think there's a random selection or something randomly that happens in there. But anyway, it's fun to talk about these things. And of course, you've gone through such amazing change. I as well did too. I mean, we didn't have the name Turks, but we were on the rough side a little bit in Martinez, you know, in the East Bay sense.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's the white 59 Chevy, the chrome wheels, and all that. And I would say everybody at Alhambra would bet against me becoming a lawyer and sitting here talking to you on television.
When we finish the show, let's go out and watch American Graffiti together again. So what a great movie that was.
Oh, wasn't that awesome?
Yeah, that's about us.
That was a great movie. Well, I can see in your photo a little bit of the Jimmy Dean, Marlon Brando, you know, the wild
I'll
ones.
tell you who I played off on. No, Elvis Presley.
Oh.
I was 2 years younger than Elvis Presley. He was just hitting it big at the time. Hard to see it in me now, but I had dark hair and just enough of a resemblance. Not enough, but when I danced to Blue Suede Shoes or Jailhouse Rock, you know, I was picking up a little bit on that energy, and it was great. And I ended up reading extensive biographies about him and learned a lot about him. He was very interesting. Man.
He was the most compulsive entertainer. I mean, in person, the people just literally, and of course they would always put the women up front, you know, and they were very attracted to him, but he was a pretty awesome.
August 16th, 30 years from the day he died. At age 42, can you imagine that? 42 years old he was.
Yeah. Drug overdose.
You got it.
How many casualties from the era that we're talking about, the casualties from drug and alcohol, is phenomenal. It's going on. And I don't think society, other than dealing with great things like AA and NA and all the AAs, and people getting clean and sober and halfway houses and live-in programs, I don't think society is really dealing with this.
You know, I think we learn from our experiences. And if we, the older generation, can come back and serve as experience and role models, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this book. I felt that if people could learn from my experience, if I can do it, why can't other people? There was nothing special about me that was so different than other people around me. Maybe I had the love of my mother, and I did have that. Broken home, though. You know, my dad left when I was 2 years old. All the stuff that goes on with other people. But I think we can change, and we can move forward, and there is hope. And in my story, I was able to come out of my alcohol abuse. I was able to change my life and have a true wonderful relationship and a true soulmate, and I use that term advisedly, relationship. But I've worked hard to get there. But I think that my story, if it means anything, is a story of redemption. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And if my book can help people learn from my story, and it's all true, every word of it in there, then I'm happy if I've saved
And
one
redemption is the answer. It's the answer, you know, and you got to let go of pride. You got to accept humility and fate and everything else, right? All of that's part of the
person.
package.
I think that's very true, and I think you need to work on yourself. One of the things
Yeah.
I did is when I quit drinking, Tom, and I don't recommend this. I really strongly recommend AA, and for lawyers, we have a group called the Other Bar. It's wonderful. It works just for lawyers and judges. I do recommend that program. But in addition to that, I moved to what you'd call the 12th step very quickly. I, for whatever reason, just had this kind of sudden flowering and opening. I had more time in the day. Rather than drinking myself stupid at night every night, I was able to go home and start to read and meditate and listen to music. And I listened to Kitaro, a great musician. I meditated. I read all these books. And I really concentrated on finding out who I was.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by a trial lawyer finds his soul in my book. I think it's about searching for the answers, the searching for the meaning of life. This is what life is about. All philosophy, all psychology, all psychiatry, all religion really is about searching for who we are.
Right.
Finding our God or our spirit or our soul in our own way. And there are many different paths. I don't recommend mine at all, but this is what it's about, is the search. And
I want to share one little thing. We could talk about the great verdicts you've had, the million-dollar, multi-million-dollar verdicts, and you've had at least 10 multi-million-dollar verdicts, at least 10 or 15. I know that for a fact. But in any event, one of the things I want to talk about is your contribution to the CTLA when you became the president, and we're talking about Prop 103, right, and a statewide initiative by the insurance industry to basically cut contingency fees down to 10% and basically drive plaintiffs and people that are injured out of the market.
Well, it's the right time and the right place, but for me it was a very great honor to be president of the organization that really took on the entire insurance industry in 1988. We had 5 initiatives on the ballot. Prop 103 with Harvey Rosenfeld and Nader was one, and that passed, thank God. But the insurance industry wanted to just wipe out everybody's rights. They wanted to put us out of business. Now, a lot of people say, well, lawyers are lawyers, why don't we just reduce their fee? But the truth of the matter is, we represent the people who only have the power. And if we can't get them to a jury, if we can't keep the courthouse steps open, we were going to end the ability of people to go to lawyers and take on anybody in any field, not just auto accidents, it's whistleblowers, it's civil rights, it's all the stuff that we fight for. And we put up a great battle, and through a lot of effort of good people like you and everyone around, we changed the perception and we won that initiative. And people said, no, it's not fair to limit fees like this if they're not limited to the defense attorneys. It's not fair for the insurance companies to come out and say, I'm going to limit the fees of the people, but not the people we pay for, and run you out of business so that if you don't have a lawyer, you're dead meat. We're seeing that in Guantanamo. What happens when people don't have lawyers? If they don't have a right to a lawyer, they go into limbo. This is a sad situation. That's on the criminal side, but the same is true here. If people have a serious remedy, then they need a lawyer. And I think that there's another thing that, if you don't mind if I pontificate here just for a moment, I think people sometimes think, well, there's a lot of stupid, frivolous lawsuits. And there may be some out there, but I'll tell you, you and I and the work we do, stop that. I take 1 out of 100 cases in my office. You probably take a very small percentage. We don't take cases that are non-meritorious. And the press picks up on every little stupid case, but those cases get thrown out. And the good cases are done by you and me and lawyers just like this all over. And the system needs us. And they need us not just to go out and be greedy lawyers, but to stand up for the little guy against the big guy, whether it's insurance companies or tobacco companies or big industry or pharmaceuticals or unsafe vehicles. Without us, there's no remedy, because the government isn't going to do it, certainly not this administration.
Anything else for the judge? That was very good. I really like that. No, and I agree with it. It was compelling the way you put that together. But I also remember in the heat of the battle, with all of that insurance and the polls looking like the proposition limiting the contingency fee to 10% was going to pass, those very clever advertising that came out with not as much money, but was very well done. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because I know you participated in that.
Oh yeah, we had very good advice. We had good political advisors. We had to find the right thing, and we had to, you know, it was rather simple when you come down to it. We had to show who was behind this. What the real motivation. People want to know who's behind this initiatives and what does it mean, and frequently you see that the initiatives process that's supposed to be done by the people are done by the big interest. They're
Yeah.
put on by tobacco interests, by insurance interests, by sometimes government interests. They're not put on by the average Joe. They don't have enough money to put on. The average citizen doesn't. So when the people knew that there was all the insurance industry that was trying to run out the people out,
They went thumbs down. Another case that you did I was familiar with was the pregnancy case, the right of a woman